Thanks so much, Wendy, for that great introduction. So welcome. We're looking forward to sharing some time with you today. So during the pandemic, we've seen a variety of images. We've seen our leaders and medical experts. We've seen frontline workers, our healthcare workers, cleaning and sanitation workers, grocery and delivery store workers, our law enforcement. And we've seen expressions of gratitude and solidarity around the world. However, the pandemic has created a context of stress. So we wanted to explore with you today some strategies for managing that feeling of stress. So our plan today, Christina and I want to share with you some strategies for eating healthy, and in that section we'll explore a healthy dietary pattern, mindful eating, and making our environment nudgy. We'll unpack what that means. And then Christina will be sharing the benefits of exercise, our 24-hour movement guidelines, Canada's 24-hour movement guidelines, and her tips for exercise snacking. Before we get started, I want to check in with you to make sure you have your props, because you need 3 raisins or craisins or nuts or pieces of cheese, just any little food items, but you need 3 of them for our mindful eating experience. And then afterwards, we'll have time for your questions. So let's get started. So what happens during stress? In the short term, our brain signals our kidneys to produce adrenaline, and this hormone in the short term can suppress our appetite so that we can deal with the crisis at hand. However, over the long-term period, then our kidneys produce this hormone called cortisol, which is a stress hormone, and this can influence our appetite. It can increase our appetite, and it can also have an impact on our food choices, with people choosing foods higher in fat and added sugar. And it can affect where we store then fat, with more fat being located in the abdominal region. And this is a risk factor over time for type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and obesity. However, it's good to keep in mind that there are other factors involved as well, including our sleep habits, exercise habits, and alcohol consumption. So in 2019, Canada released its new food guide. I'm sure some of you have seen it already, but what's important about this food guide is that it emphasizes a pattern of meals and snacks rather than superfoods or a focus on any single one nutrient. In consulting with people like you and me, they found that people wanted a practical tool that would help them in the moment when they come to eat. So we have this balance plate that features around 40 different foods. However, we don't need to have a whole bunch of different foods at every meal or snack. The importance is on the proportions rather than the portions. So we have here half the plate with vegetables and fruit. So we see here an emphasis on color. We see dark leafy greens, broccoli, and then other brightly colored vegetables, then reds and oranges, and then fruits as well. In our protein side of the plate, we have our yogurt, cheese, tofu, seafood and fish, legumes, nuts, seeds, eggs, and some red meat as well. And then we have our whole grain section of the plate. So here we have some wild rice, pasta, bread, quinoa, but we can also include other whole grains like oats, barley, millet. And then sometimes we can also count some of these starchy vegetables over here, like you see our sweet potato and potatoes, because our bodies respond to these starchy vegetables much in the same way that they respond to the whole grain portion of the plate. So we see here our proportions. We have half, a quarter protein, and then a quarter whole grain foods. And if we can have meals throughout the day that emphasize these 3 food groups and snacks that include 2 of any of the food groups, then we're well on our way to meeting our needs for the recommendations for our vitamins like vitamin A, folate, for minerals like calcium, potassium, just to name a few. And then also for things like carbohydrates, proteins, fats, and dietary fiber. So there's a couple other important things to keep in mind. So we want our plates to be colorful, and that's also a little bit of an indicator for the variety of nutrients that we can be receiving. And we want to make sure too that we don't skip meals and that we can drink often throughout the day, making water our drink of choice. So let's look at some practical examples of meals and snacks. So here we have some beautiful examples. However, it doesn't always have to look as perfect and well put together as that. Healthy just means balanced. So we can have our balance in terms of having those three types of foods that I just mentioned, our vegetables, our carbohydrates and starchy vegetables, and our protein foods, in order to create some balanced meals and snacks. So we asked some participants who were part of a research project. They were working on preparing a salad recipe. We asked them to take the ingredients of that recipe and to group them according to this kind of balanced plate principle. So we have the vegetables on one side, the grain in 1/4 of the bowl, and the kidney beans in the other part of the bowl. So you get a nice illustration using a recipe of kind of that balanced principle. And then we mix them up, and there you see those salads there. So it seems like a simple idea. However, a research study published last year found that only 11% of us were able to fill their plate with fruits and vegetables at every meal. So there's a variety of reasons for that, but it doesn't help to keep refreshing the message so that we can make it a practice and part of our daily routine. So we can also use label reading when we're looking at our food products in order to explore healthy choices. So we want to include choices that have less saturated and trans fats, less sodium, less added sugars, and so on. Those are indicated by the yellow arrows on this food label here. And then we want to choose food items that have more dietary fiber and protein. And how we can make our choices is looking at the daily value. So we see here that 5% is a little and 15% is a lot. So we can use this as kind of a barometer for making our choices. And this label here that you see on the right-hand side is actually the new label, and companies have until 2022 to make changes on their products. But what is exciting about this is that we now have a percent daily value for sugars. We didn't used to have that. And also this handy little rule of 5% or less is a little and 15% or more is a lot will now be on each label. So we can also look at the ingredient list, because the ingredients that are at the top of the list are there because they are in the highest amount, because the ingredients are listed in order by weight. So that's all well and good. We have some general healthy eating principles, and by far that's still been demonstrated in the literature to be a good approach for favorizing our immune system, for decreasing our risk for chronic diseases, and decreasing our risk for deficiencies, which would over time compromise our body's ability to just do our day-to-day activities and be in a good position to have a healthy immune system as well. But what do we do in the context of stress? So we can look at some of the research, and there's been a lot of research looking at the idea of mindful eating, so much so that it is now included as part of the new food guide as one of the key recommendations that we can approach how we eat using principles of mindful eating. And they looked at studies looking at chronic conditions like diabetes, heart disease, obesity, eating disorders, and then the context of stress as well. So how do we define mindful eating? Well, simply put, there's many different types of definitions, but simply put, we can think about it in terms of our attention and our attitude. So our attention, that has to do with being present, limiting distractions when it's time to eat, limiting our screens at the table, and taking the time to just really enjoy and appreciate our food. So I have some examples of some of my go-to snacks here. So it could mean concretely that if as I'm eating like my peppers, I notice like the colors. When I have my yogurt, and I have some flax here that I ground up and that I keep stored in the fridge, that I can enjoy like the texture. And then I have some nuts, some craisins, and a little bit of dark chocolate and some dried prunes here as well. So it means that I can also enjoy the crunchy texture of them. So, and then in terms of our attitude, so we want to approach then our food with an attitude of non-judgment and curiosity. So taking a break from assessing or evaluating ourselves and giving ourselves a little bit of self-kindness. So some ways to incorporate mindful eating as we're eating at home, we can ask ourselves how hungry or full we are before and after a meal. And we can notice the subtle flavors or secret ingredients. Christina and I were talking, and she mentioned about how she asked her kids, what's the secret ingredient in this recipe? When we eat a pleasant meal, we can notice how it feels after we eat. Are we more relaxed? Do we feel more energy? And do we appreciate how the food looks on our plate? And before we eat, can we appreciate the smells? And as we eat, can we taste every bite of the food that we eat? So I want to invite you to just look at one research study. Again, there's been many, but I just want to share this one, especially looking at the context of stress and stress eating and how mindful eating was helpful in the context of this study. So it was a study done in women. There were two groups. Both groups received a bit of information about healthy lifestyles. So healthy eating, they had a 2-hour session of nutrition and exercise information. And then the mindfulness group had the healthy lifestyle, plus they had 10 weekly group sessions where they explored mindfulness, and they had individual activities to complete daily. And they were asked every time they ate, as much as possible, to try and eat mindfully. So it doesn't mean thinking of all those questions that I just mentioned, but it could mean picking one, that I'm going to notice how my food smells or how my food tastes, or that I'm going to pause afterwards and see how I feel, and then track it to see the results over time. So after a 4-month period, they found in the group who was part of the mindfulness intervention that they reported a decrease in their sense of chronic stress. Also, they reported a decrease in external eating. So that means eating for any reason other than being hungry. So it could be in response to stress, but it could be in response to other cues, visual cues, like having seen a commercial that makes us hungry, or anything else. And these women also had a decreased cortisol awakening response, which served kind of like as an index for how much of the stress hormone that their bodies were making. And over the 4-month period, they had a decrease of fat stored in that abdominal region, which can increase our risk for certain chronic diseases. Their weight didn't change over that 4-month period, but there were some positive effects from this study. So they did a follow-up with these same women, and the researchers wanted to look at cellular aging. So they can do this by looking at what they call telomeres, which are the ends of our chromosomes in our DNA. And the researchers in this particular study, they didn't actually measure the telomeres, but they looked at a little helper enzyme to see how active it is, because if it's more active, it's more involved in keeping the cell younger. And they found that there was an increased activity of this enzyme and a decreased amount of cortisol in these women who were part of the mindfulness intervention. And interestingly, they made a change in their food choices, and they had a decrease in energy coming from fat. So they were making choices that were more healthy for them in the long run. Yet, they reported that they had less dietary restraint. So that means behaviors more linked to dieting, like restricting or feeling that they can only eat certain things. So the authors concluded that the present results point to the need to encourage flexible and balanced weight loss strategies to avoid a sense of deprivation that may lead to chronic consumption of high-fat foods and eventual accelerated cellular aging. Because they found that as the women reported less dietary behaviors, they had increased activity of that little helper enzyme, so keeping their cells young. So I'd like to invite you to participate in a mindful eating experience with me. So if you have your props ready, you need your 3 raisins or craisins or nuts or cheese. So I'd invite you to pick up the first one. And what do you see and how does it smell as you pick up the first one? So you can eat it. And then now as you pick up the second one, when you put it in your mouth, how does it feel in your mouth? And how does it taste? And now as you pick up the third one, I invite you to think about where it came from and how it nourishes our body. So if you had a raisin or another dried fruit, I want you to think about, or I'd invite you to think about how it was as it was growing, the sunshine that it took in, the nutrients that it took from the earth, and then the hands that picked it. And then as it made its way through delivery and then to the store and eventually into your home as you're eating it now. And as you're eating it, I want to ask you to think about how it's nourishing your body. So as you're chewing it, we have enzymes even in your mouth that start breaking down some of the sugars found in the fruit. And then it breaks it down so your body can absorb the sugar and it can go in your bloodstream. And eventually it will make its way to our cells to be used as fuel or energy, so that we have the energy as we're sitting here, breathing in and breathing out, because our muscles use energy to help us breathe. And as we move, they're also using some energy, and our brains as well are using glucose or sugar for energy. So this experience might be a bit different from when we take a handful of foods. So I'd invite you to reflect on how this experience is different from eating a handful of raisins or a handful of whichever food item that you might have had, and how you would describe this experience. You can either jot this down, or if you want to share this with us in the chat, we'd love to hear from you as well. So how do we make sure that we can have experiences like the healthy dietary pattern that we talked about with Canada's Food Guide and mindful eating experiences in our day-to-day? Well, it doesn't just happen. And as researchers, Dr. Thaler and Dr. Sunstein have pointed out in their research, there's no such thing as neutral design. Every environment that we have nudges us toward a certain choice. And also, we don't make good decisions when we're inexperienced, or poorly informed, or not aware of the recommendations, and especially when we're tired or hungry. So how can we make our environment nudgy to encourage us to have that healthy dietary pattern, and to encourage us to have the ability to practice some mindful eating when we come to our meals and our snacks? So one way that we can do that is to set an eating routine. So we can think about that routine in terms of days of the week, what we're going to eat and what meals we want to plan. And we can also think of that as during our day. So it can be helpful to think about times that we're going to eat throughout the day, and to try and plan our meals and snacks at certain times. And research has even suggested that it can be helpful for our digestive health and for our for reducing our risk for some chronic conditions over time. And if we can try and have more of our meals and snacks in the daylight hours as opposed to eating them very late at night, then that can be beneficial as well. So we want to make our planning as simple as possible so that we can have default choices, because nudge theory shows us that the simplest choices are often what we will end up putting into practice in our day-to-day. So one way that we can do that is using 2-in-1 meal or recipes, so that we can eat the same thing a couple times during the week, and then it means it's a bit less planning, and we're more likely to sustain the habit then over time. Once we have our meals, then we can make our grocery list and stock our kitchen. So I want to show you an example of some of the 2-for-1 meals. So here we have a like a little menu plan throughout the week, but you'll notice that some of the meals repeat, and it's actually just 3 different breakfast meals that rotate, 3 different lunch meals that rotate, and 4 to 6 different supper meals. However, some of the the components of the supper meals we can reuse in a subsequent supper. So it means not having to come up with cooking a whole fresh meal all throughout the day, and then we can limit the time that we spend thinking of all the ideas, because sometimes that's what limits us in our day-to-day. So for example, if Tuesday is Taco Tuesday, I can use the meat either for Wednesday if I'm having pasta and I want to have meat sauce, or I can chill it and freeze it to use either for a subsequent supper for like my pizza to put as part of the sauce, or if I'm going to make a shepherd's pie and I want to include some meat in that. So that can be one example of a 2-in-1 recipe. Another example is a recipe like a burrito bowl where we can roast like some beans. It could be chickpeas or black beans, and we can have our rice, but we can make in bigger quantities so that we can use those ingredients for other meals throughout the week. And then we want to refrigerate or freeze all leftovers within a 2-hour period to minimize the chance of bacteria growing. And we have some resources available too for you concerning food safety, and we'll be putting them along with the recording on our website. But it has guidelines for safe food storage. And a lot of meals can be safe in the fridge if they're chilled promptly for between a 2 to 4 day period. So when we're putting our grocery list together and we want to stock our kitchen, we can think in terms of our fruits and vegetables. So we can have some items on hand that are less perishable, like onions, garlic, carrots and celery will last for a while in the fridge. Clementines, oranges, and apples will last for a while at room temperature. We can also have some frozen vegetables or fruit mixes that we can pull out and just use a certain amount that we need from the freezer. And then we can have some fresh options that we can rotate from week to week, and we can just buy what we need for that given week. And then in terms of our protein choices, we can have a milk or soy beverage that will give us protein, yogurt, cheese, fish or seafood. So this could be fresh, canned, or frozen. Legumes, again, that could be dried or canned in terms of any of the types of beans. And we have nuts, poultry, and red meat and eggs stocked in our kitchen as well. For grains and starches, this can include bread, cereals, potatoes, rice, pasta, and some other whole grains like barley, millet, whole grains, oats, and that we can have on hand. And these can last for a good while if they're stored at room temperature and in like a relatively safe, dry place in your kitchen. So these are just some resources for meal and snack ideas. We have Cookspiration, which is an app and a website from Dietitians of Canada that has meal and snack ideas depending on the time of day and for your mood and for timing if you want something quick and easy. There's also Défi Santé, which is going on right now, which has a lot of great recipe ideas. Then we have the Rock What You've Got from the Guelph Family Health Study, which are recipes that are focus group tested and uses that idea of 2-in-1 recipes where we can stretch what we have to use in a different subsequent recipe or as leftovers. And then this is a great little resource to using on hand our 3 components of our plate, our proteins, our grains or starches, and then also our vegetables. And you can swap in different ingredients for any of those 3 options to create different casseroles based on what you have on hand. And so that can be great to use for making up some meals during this time, during the pandemic. So in summary, we got to discuss a healthy dietary pattern and how a focus on our meals and snacks as in the form of foods can be helpful as opposed to just focusing on single nutrients or superfoods. And we talked a little bit about mindful eating, our attention and our attitude, as a part of that, and making our environment nudgy to set us up for being able to have that healthy dietary pattern by setting a routine, planning some meals, and having regular food items on hand. So now let's get moving with my colleague, Christina Weiss. Thank you so much for your time. I enjoyed sharing with you, and I look forward to your questions.
So thank you, everybody. I'd invite you to get up right now and stretch your legs if you need to, or go to the bathroom as you wish. I'm just going to put up my slides. Okay. So welcome to everybody to my home to your home. I hope you're enjoying this beautiful day. So who am I? I am Christina Weiss. I am a daughter to 2 aging parents. I am a sibling. I am a mother to 3 boys, 10, 12, and 14. I am a wife, a friend, an employee, a supervisor, a kinesiologist, and a former athlete in rugby, triathlons, and running. So who needs help with exercise? Well, at the Perform Center, we see certain people come in and ask for tips on how to be more active, and that is perhaps those who've stopped being active and they want to start again. People who have chronic conditions, athletes. We have a lot of varsity athletes now coming in and doing some programs with my colleague, Henry Tung. We have isolated seniors, people wanting to maintain a healthy lifestyle and want some support. People with disabilities who need assistance with adjusting the machines and such. And we have like some intern students who come in and put their theory into practice by working with different clients. So why exercise? Why is exercise important? Obviously, we're at home right now, we're self-isolating, and we're going outside probably more than we have in a long time to do our walks and cycling and things like that. And exercise is really important for mental health. And what we see in the literature, especially from Dr. Mark Tremblay, who is part of the Healthy Active Kids, is that children are not exercising enough. What he's seen is that children are very active when they're at school because there's recess and programs right now to keep children active. And also they're participating in very structured sports, hockey, soccer, basketball, dance. But on the whole, they're scoring a grade of D for their activity, and that is not great for their benefits in terms of their brain health. Also, Dr. Brendan Stubbs has done a lot of research and has published a lot since 2017 on people with mental health, people also being treated for mental health, such as high stress, anxiety, and depression. And he says that less than 50% of those people diagnosed are not exercising enough for health benefits. So we know that exercise is a great stress reliever, and we're going to talk a little bit more about what those benefits are. So Dr. Mickelson and her colleagues created a wonderful review on the mechanisms involved in improving mental health with exercise. So what happens is that when we exercise, we increase the oxygen in our bodies and also through our brain, through increased breathing. And this increases our brain health and our memory, and it slows down our aging. In fact, we have research going on at the Perform Center right now where they tested people's memory. And what they did is they had them exercise or not exercise, gave them some memory cards, and then either asked them to nap or not to nap, and then looked at how well they were able to do or score on their next test, on their memory test. And they showed that when you exercise and then you learn and then you nap, you actually have the best memory of what you had just learned. So that may help us with our children. So exercise also makes our heartbeat faster, which improves our blood circulation. It increases our mental toughness. So we learn from our mistakes. We get to try different things and find solutions for those mistakes that we make. And that helps us in our ability to cope with stress and to release the cortisol and adrenaline that is released from our adrenal glands, which is just on the top of our kidneys. It also decreases inflammation, and this is great news for people who suffer from arthritis or osteoarthritis because it reduces pain throughout the day and it actually increases mobility. It also contracts our skeletal muscles, and this is really important. When we're seeing that there's overload or extra development in the muscles, we see that that actually improves our muscle and bone health, which has a lot of benefits that I've just mentioned. It also releases mood-enhancing hormones so that we actually feel very good. We feel well after we exercise, and this reduces our stress because we had a chance to get out of our mental box. And it increases our skills because the more we do things, the more we walk, the more we run, the more we do yoga, the better we become, and that increases our self-esteem and our confidence and improves our mental health. And it keeps our waistlines from expanding. So the more active we are, the better we are at managing and preventing certain diseases such as cardiovascular disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, and cancer. So talking about our waistlines, I'd like to draw your attention to Dr. Santosa and her colleagues who just published a review article on obesity and aging. And what they were able to see is actually very stunning. There's a lot of great information in there. I guess I'll just point out a few, that obesity actually shortens our telomere length, which is what Théa was talking a little bit about before, which increases our aging by about 8.8 years. Excess adiposity also is associated with 10 years of older brain. So compared to people our age, we're 10 years older. Every unit of increase in BMI, so BMI is actually an adiposity measure. It's our weight in kilograms over our height in meters squared. And they showed that for every unit of that, it increases the onset of Alzheimer's disease by 6.7 months. And yet there is a way to change our risk of aging prematurely, and that is to lose weight. So losing a kilogram of body weight can decrease our blood pressure by 1 point in systolic pressure and 0.92 in diastolic pressure, and 10% of weight loss can reduce risk of all cancers by 10%. This is, I find, very good news. So what does a healthy 24-hour look like? Well, there's many different guides that the Canadian Society for Exercise Physiology has produced, but I'll just go over a few here. If you had to exercise, your biggest bang for your buck is really to exercise at intensity, at a moderate to vigorous intensity. So if you're looking to spend time exercising, this is where you want to be. You want to add those intensity moments into your day. And what does that mean? Well, you can do it in 30 minutes per day of tummy time for children, infants, 60 minutes per day for toddlers and children 5 to 17 years old, and about 150 minutes per week of aerobic exercise, including muscle and bone building exercise for adults and older adults. And they encourage also balance exercises for people who are at a risk for falls. Also, you want to incorporate a little bit of light activity in your day, and this is mostly for children and youth, that we want them accumulating minutes of just play outside and just to get those skills and to become more physically active. We need sleep between 7 and 17 hours, depending on how old we are, and we really want to try and reduce the amount of time that we're sedentary, limit it by moving a little bit more throughout the day and trying to reduce our recreational screen time to 2 hours a day. So what does vigorous and moderate exercise mean? Well, this is what we use at the Perform Center. We use the rate of perceived exertion as a way to see where people are feeling during their testing and also during exercise. And if we look at a scale from 6 to 20, we really want to be in the area of 12 to 16. So this is enough to increase our heart rate. It's enough to make us breathe a bit heavier. And this is where we want to be, at least for some of the part that we're physically active. So what do we want to be doing in cardiovascular exercise? Is we want to start with a warm-up of about 2 to 5 minutes, and with a cool down the same way to let our heart rate and our blood pressure come down. We want to use large muscles such as the chest, the back, the thighs, the buttocks, the abdomen. We want to reduce our muscle soreness by building over time, and I have also a little magic bag here that I use to reduce muscle soreness. It's great to heat in the microwave and also to stick in the freezer. And you can use a lot of different tools to measure your progress, such as fitness trackers. There's many different ones: Apple Watches, Polar Watches, Garmin, and step counters, such as pedometers that you can wear on your hip or on your arm or on your wrist to measure your steps per day. So we also have muscle and bone building exercises that we want to include, and that's 2 times a week, maybe 1 to 4 sets, 8 to 12 reps per day, working at somewhat hard. Doesn't have to be a long amount of time, about 5 minutes. And we want to be working those large muscle groups and multi-joint exercises. And for people who are looking to do balance, well, you can stand on one foot and do toe taps in the front, the side, and the back. And this is a really great exercise to do to build balance. So now there's a lot of talk about exercise snacking. And what is that? Well, it's kind of like a high intensity interval training. It doesn't have to be very long. If somebody said, if I really need to exercise, please tell me exactly how much I need to do. Well, there's research showing that you don't actually have to do that much to get some benefits. And what it means is Dr. Jabala from the University of McMaster showed that if you do, he kind of tested whether you could do 20-second bursts 3 times in a workout or 20-second bursts throughout the day with 1 to 4 hours in between. And he said, okay, which one's better? And in fact, it doesn't matter. So if you decide you want to like run up the stairs in the morning, lunch, and evening on your way in and out of work, well, that is going to do it. That's going to increase your fitness by about 6%. And Dr. Jason Steffner, who's now at the University of Ottawa, but was also at the Perform Center before that, he looked at brains using MRI, so magnetic resonant imaging techniques, and he looked at their brains and he noticed that those people who climbed a flight of stairs per day had brains about 6 months younger than those people their own age. So that's pretty incredible because it doesn't take a long time to climb a flight of stairs, but yet this little bit of energy throughout the day can really make a difference in preventing some aging and keeping us fit. So what can we do for exercise snacking? Well, we can do a 10-minute power yoga session. We can dance to our favorite songs. We can include some jumping in there. We can perform 26 seconds of sit-to-stand exercises or squats. We can walk up a flight of stairs, take a power walk, sprint for about 20 seconds. The other day I was taking a walk and I saw a man in business suit sprinting up my hill. And I was saying, what is he doing? I thought maybe he just needs to get out of the house. So, you know, these things make a difference in terms of our mental health. And there's a couple of workouts here I provided. The toilet paper workout, you can find that on YouTube. And Défi Santé has a bunch of workouts that they have on their screens. So I provided some different workouts that you might find interesting for different age groups. I know I don't want to talk too long because I want to let you have some time to ask questions. However, I wanted to point out just a few tips for different age groups. So we see that for exercise for children, we really want them to exercise using perhaps animals. So pretending like they're a frog and jumping and getting them to jump for 45 seconds, or doing a bear walk, doing a gorilla shuffle, cheetah run, a crawl. And Dr. Santos actually said that she did this with her children and they loved it. So doing different animal noises and movements is really fun for children. For teens and tweens, this is where we see that children really like to connect with their other peers. So there's been a lot of online chatting. We get a lot of YouTube videos from my children's friends, of parents doing choreographic dances with their children, doing hip hop. I've been throwing the football around with my children as we go for a walk. I find my children are into gaming, so they love to do things that are related to their gaming. So you can see in the picture below that there's a flossing exercise there, and that's what they do on Fortnite. There's also Orange Justice or things like that really use a lot of energy, and you can get your children to be active that way. And sprinting and competition is also children love to compete and do different things like that. So what is the difference between high intensity exercises versus continuous exercise? What's the benefit? Well, in the long term, not much, but in session by session, there's quite a big difference. People who do higher intensity bouts of exercise generally find it more interesting, more fun. They're shorter workouts. They're more efficient. So you can get your biggest bang for your buck in shorter time. So that can be sometimes fun. The only thing is there is a risk of injury if you're working too high in terms of intensity. So just to manage that intensity with a warm up and a cool down. So I provided a couple of different workouts here. This is a high intensity circuit for physically active people. It's basically 20 seconds on, 20 seconds off in rest. You use a timer and you can do jumping jacks, burpees, mountain climber exercises, explosive push-ups, a side plank, which is really good for the obliques and the core, and then a Superman exercise for the back. So this is just 6 exercises. You keep doing them in a short period of time. In 5 minutes, you're done. Bing, bang, boom. I've also included a home workout as part of this webinar, and it provides all the descriptions of different exercises. They're a bit more lower intensity and adapted to people who may have mobility issues or low physical activity, but they're great whether you do them with a bit of jumping jacks between each one or you just do them on their own. They're really fun to do. And I've also included some stretching exercises in a home workout that you will receive after this session. And I just wanted to finish with some general tips and tricks. And Billy, thank you for your attention for today. So what I would recommend is that you choose a time that works for you and make it a routine. So choose a place and prepare that place. For me, it's in my living room. I prepare it by moving the rocking chair and being with my kids while I exercise. Get your family, friends, and coworkers involved in some kind of competition. I think that's lots of fun. You can even do that at a distance and say, okay, we're going to do a challenge on push-ups, or how many minutes can you get in a day? The friendly competition is actually what makes it very interesting and fun. We even had that going on at our workplace too. Even small amounts of exercise help in terms of making a big difference to your stress levels and your mental health. So don't be afraid to add 20 seconds, 10 seconds, anytime you can get to really add that time into your day. Be flexible, change it up with your increased intensity. Take more breaks from your sedentary time. Play a really good tune like Justin Bieber and Post Malone and Drake, and just boogie with your kids. Use apps and videos, and if you really need support, you can always reach out to a kinesiologist and work with a trainer. So I want to thank you so much for listening, and I'm going to open it up for questions. And here I go. Let's try and make this happen.
So great. Thank you, Christina, and thank you, Théa. So I just want to invite the attendees, the audience, to ask us any questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, should you have any. And we're going to be doing our best to answer them at the moment. One of my questions that came in, Christina, is for you. So the question is, how do you recommend hitting that 10,000 step goal at home? I live in a small studio with no stairs.
So if you're able to go out and walk, that helps. Doing chores around the house helps. Doing yoga sessions, dancing in your kitchen while you're cooking supper. I find that when we're waiting for things to boil, we are just watching it and it takes forever. We can just put on some music and dance while we do that. If you're working from home, you can get up from your desk and just take a break to do some step-ups on a chair, do some push-ups, do some squats. It sounds really silly because it's something that you can do in your house, but it really makes a difference in terms of getting your minutes of physical activity in. I don't know if that helps.
Great, thank you, Christina. We have a couple questions regarding motivation. It says, motivation is the hardest part. Do you have any suggestions? Someone else asked, what are some techniques that I could use to stay motivated or to keep me on track?
Is that question for me?
Yes, Christina, that I believe that it is saying motivation. I assume it's motivation to exercise, but maybe we could have answers from Théa as well in terms of motivation to stay healthy and eat well.
Well, what I would recommend to get motivated is most of the people that come in to perform actually have a goal in mind. They have a wedding they have to go to. They have to get into a bikini in a very short period of time. They're going to Spain to walk a beautiful pilgrimage walk, and they want to make sure that they don't get injured. They're going skiing, hiking. So I really find that if you want to stay motivated, the best thing to do is set a goal. It can be a short-term goal and then a long-term goal, and that really helps you make some steps towards that goal. If it's day-to-day, it's really hard sometimes to get motivated when it's a nasty weather out there. But if you set a routine where you say to yourself, I'm going to go in the morning sometime, and I'm going to go in the afternoon or after supper sometime for a walk, then the routine, even if you're not motivated, will get you into action to do those minutes of physical activity. Théa, I don't know if you want to answer a question.
Yeah, sure. I think, well, it you can start in terms of your eating habits with something that you enjoy, and it can be as simple as building a snack that you enjoy and that will satisfy at a time of day where you might usually make a different choice, but it can be to plan for that snack that you know that you will enjoy, and you can incorporate some strategies from mindful eating to take the time to savor it and to check in with yourself how hungry you're feeling before and how you're feeling afterwards as well. And then in terms of motivation for a healthy dietary pattern, it can be as simple as starting with building one meal that has those types of proportions a day, and then you can work up from there. But immersing yourself in some of the resources that we mentioned too, because we have some great resources that can be helpful as well.
Great, thank you, Théa. We have another question for Christina.
Yes.
40-minute moderate walk, is it helpful?
Absolutely. In fact, it's amazing. 40-minute motivational power walk is amazing. In fact, Brendan Stubbs, who is a doctor for the treatment of anxiety, depression, and stress reduction, says that 2 to 3 walks of between 45 to 60 minutes is perfect. So after that, you're going to feel great. Should feel great.
Thank you again, Christina. We have a question for Théa here. What snacks can you recommend for people with IBD? I can't eat raw vegetables, nuts, or fruits, and I have a very hard time finding healthy snacks. Any recommendations?
Well, sometimes it can be helpful to have a certain portion of even like a small portion of like a smoothie that you might be able to tolerate. You can even throw in a little bit of ginger into the smoothie. So this could have some fruits that you enjoy, and it could have if you are able to tolerate a certain type of milk, it could include that, but it could also include like some water and some juice as well. So I would say, like, starting with small portions of foods that you can tolerate and to try and build up from there in terms of building a healthy snack, and to incorporate a source of protein into either like your smoothie if you're having that, or another type of protein that you are able to tolerate. So it sounds like nuts won't work, but maybe there could be other types of protein choices that may work. Sometimes even if there's some crackers that you enjoy, and if you like some of the canned fishes, sometimes that can be nice, like to spread on crackers, or if you I don't know, sometimes people don't tolerate nuts, but they can tolerate some small amounts of peanut butter, which is technically a legume, so that could be a strategy as well.
Great, thank you, Théa. We have another question for Christina. How important is how important is the time of day for exercise, or does it not really matter?
Doesn't matter. Find a time that works for you. And that can be just the trickiest part right there. Sometimes if you have digestive issues, in the sense that you want to do something that's a little bit more vigorous, depending on your stomach, you may have to wait 2 hours to do that. So maybe, first thing in the morning might be nice, or in the evening. It depends on you and your stomach.
Wonderful. Another question for Théa. I have a tendency to eat at the moment. How far in advance should I cook meals, and usually what time of the day?
Well, I mean, you can cook some meals, some fresh. You can have some go-to items that are prepared so that you can take them out and use them as you need them. So I'm thinking things like a whole grain bread, or like some whole grain cereals that you could have either with yogurt or milk, or some fresh fruits, or even some frozen fruits, like sometimes some frozen berries can work well with that too. So those things can be kind of stocked either in your fridge or your pantry, so that you're able to take them out when you need them. And then in terms of cooking, like your meals, you can prepare some of those in advance so that you're able to just pull them out and reheat them either in the microwave or on the stove. But it's really up to you in terms of what else you have going on within your day-to-day routine, because you can cook them fresh as well.
Thank you very much. We have another question for Christina. One of the slides said to limit sitting for extended periods. This is very hard for students who have 3-hour lectures and then assignments when they get home. How can students be more active in their daily lives and at school?
That is a challenge, and some of the lectures are very long. There's things that we can control in our life, and there's certain things that we can't. I guess we could develop some feet wiggling experiences where we just bounce our legs, but there's really nothing you can do except when you're finished your lecture. Perhaps the best thing to do is just to get up, maybe do a flight of stairs, or just to go outside and just do some sit to stands on the park bench. Or just to have a quick game of basketball. I know the kids get home and sometimes they just want to get out and move and just bounce around a basketball or kick with the soccer ball around. And that can be at any age. It doesn't have to be young children. I know my neighbor was 25 bouncing the basketball, shooting some hoops after a day's work or something like that. You try and fit it in when you can. That's all I can say.
Thank you, Christina. We have another question for you. Is it better to work out vigorously for a short period of time or moderate exercise for a longer time?
I think they're equal. That's what we've seen with high intensity interval training is if you have time to do a longer bout of exercise, then you can go and make it very moderate. So, and longer. But if there's a lot of people who are balancing multiple priorities in their life, and time is of the essence. So sometimes if you don't have a lot of time, a short, powerful, vigorous workout will do the trick. So they're equivalent. It's just one takes a shorter period of time and the moderate will take a bit longer.
Great. Some questions for you, Théa. What is your take on protein bars? Do you recommend using them as a meal substitute, i.e. for breakfast?
Well, so the protein bars, it will give you some part of your protein component of your plate. It could be good though also to combine that with having like either a fruit or vegetable if you want, or a whole grain as well. So the idea is that is to try and get at least like 3 of those different types of foods at many of your main meals, because we want to be able to hit all your targets for your different vitamins and minerals that are found across the different food groups. So for example, some B vitamins might not be found in as high of quantity in some of our protein foods, and some of our vitamin C as well, or vitamin A or E. So it's nice to have complements of different types of foods because they will each bring us different things.
Wonderful. Thank you. We have some more questions for you, Théa. There is a lot of talk about keto diets. Is it possible to eat a balanced keto diet as a vegan?
If you're able to have some plant-based protein sources, so your legumes, because it depends how we define the keto diet, because some definitions do not include too many legumes, but I'm assuming if you're vegan that you're incorporating some form of protein somehow. So I think it makes it challenging. It would be recommended to try and include a supplement, especially for some vitamin B12, and potentially maybe some iron, depending on your overall intake and your dietary pattern over time. And I don't know if you're taking any medications too that might increase some of your risk for deficiencies, but having a good intake of some whole grains and vegetables, that will give you some complements for some of the proteins also that you need. So it requires oversight and planning, and then too, it would be good to get support just to make sure that within your overall dietary pattern over several days that you're able to meet the recommendations for your age group, gender, and your lifestyle.
Thank you, Théa. There's some more questions for you. Thank you for the nice presentations. I wanted to know, what are your thoughts on cutting the daily calorie intake since we're not being active all the way throughout the day? I've been trying intermittent fasting and it's working well so far.
So if we're able to curb like our intake throughout the day and like your timing, if you're still able to get meals that feature those 3 different types of food groups, and have at least several meals of those on, like using the timing that you've chosen, then you can still meet your needs. It's just going to be in a different time frame, more suited to the intermittent fasting schedule that you have. And if you are reducing some of your your overall energy intake, it would be good to know like how much you are restricting, and is this sustainable over time for someone of your age and activity level and gender, to know, like, are you going to be able to meet your needs long term? Because it could be possible, but I just don't know, because I don't know your whole lifestyle and to know like your full set of needs.
Thank you. We have another question for Christina. What would you recommend as exercise for slipped disc or chronic pain?
Well, it really depends on what movements bother you in those, like, it depends where the slip disc occurs and where the pain is. In fact, I want to highlight that there is a study going on for chronic pain, back pain at Perform with Dr. Maryse Fortin, and she will be, I imagine, recruiting participants as soon as we get back there. Basically, you don't want to activate pain when you're exercising. So if you are having pain, avoid those exercises that are causing you pain. What is really good as a preliminary step to help you keep your core strength is you can lie down on the ground and really try activating your transverse abdominis muscle. Well, you may not know what that is, but if you do, what you want to do is lie down with your knees bent, and you want to try and flatten out your back, stick your tummy into the ground, and you want to try and engage your lower abs. And you would hold it for 10 seconds and do that 10 times. You can also flip onto your stomach, and without moving, you would try and contract your gluteal muscles. And this will actually activate the core, but the multifidus muscles that are between your vertebrae in your back. And that will be a really good step forward as you prepare to move. If that's okay, then there's always different progressions that you can do, such as a glute bridge or doing a plank on your knees. But ideally, you really want to try and activate your core, because that's going to give you the support of your spine if you're having some slip discs.
Great. Thank you very much, Christina. So we're getting towards the end of our webinar. I still see that we have many questions here. We're going to take maybe just one more, and then we're going to, as a reminder, post this presentation on the Perform website, and we'll also post some of the questions that we received and did not have time to answer. So one more question for Théa. How do you wean yourself from having dessert right after a meal? I know that I am not hungry, but yet I cannot resist something sweet after a meal.
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, so a lot of times we might enjoy a little something sweet to end the meal, and that's okay if that works for you. However, if you know you might want something later on too, then it could be a matter of trying both strategies to see, like if some days you might want to have it at a later time, so you can avoid having it at both times, or putting yourself in a situation where you might want more than just the portion that you've decided on. Because a lot of people report more overeating or eating in response to stress in the evening hours, and so it's a matter of choosing and knowing yourself what will work for you.
Great. Thank you very much, Théa. So I just want to thank everyone for attending our first Perform Colloquium webinar, and we hope you do look out for future webinars that we'll be hosting. Until then, I wish everyone stay safe and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. And thank you to our speakers, Christina and Théa.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.